Phone series.
It was all with good reason.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. And a special welcome to. I'll try again. Welcome back, everybody. And a special welcome to Elizabeth Hughes coming in online. Elizabeth, we're in one of our the old Wallace County Council chambers in Otautau. So
I
don't know
can
if you
see that.
came to this building in your travels, but it's very nostalgic, and I'm feeling very elevated up here on the front desk.
In your rightful
My
place.
gavel.
In your rightful place, Rob.
So the next report that we've got is the Community Board Health Check, which is on page 131. So the councillors that were around last triennium will know that this was a piece of work kicked off in 2021 from memory that Elizabeth did, and this is the kind of a second iterative piece of that. But did you want to talk to the Law of Beauty, or should I jump straight to Elizabeth?
No, we'll pass on to, thank you.
So without further ado, I'll hand over to Elizabeth to talk to her report.
Kia ora, everybody, and from the fine and sunny spring in the Waikato up here. Look, I'm not going to walk you through the report page by page. I'm on limited time, and I'm sure you are too. There is probably about 3 or 4 things I'd really like to highlight, and then have the opportunity to answer any of your specific queries about it. I think the first thing that I'd like to acknowledge is, since I did the original health check back in 2021, there had been some areas of improvement that were quite noticeable in the way the community boards were operating. And that was very pleasing to see. Clearly, some of the recommendations from that earlier report had been adopted and moved through in the way that the council is and the community boards are working together. So that was actually quite heartening. What I did with this one was a similar process where I interviewed the community board chairs or the members. I did observations at the meetings. I also did a confidential survey this time, which was a bit of an improvement on last time. Interviews with the mayor and some elected members, interviews with staff, and then I reviewed the last health check against those things. So that's probably the key thing there. I don't think I need to go through the substantive part of the report in the time we have. What I'd like to do is ensure that if you've read the green quotes, which are dotted throughout the report, it will give you a very good sense of where I landed in terms of my advice and steps from here. So the first and main part, and why this is a very timely meeting, of my advice to you is that working with the community boards better and improving the way that the council and community boards operate starts with the induction. And if the induction process acknowledges and enables community boards to step into a governance space, but in their own, and I'm going to say quirky ways, because there are quirky ways and that's part of the value of them, that's actually going to be a really big improvement to moving forward. And while many of them had said the induction, those that had been there a bit longer, said the induction process had improved tremendously from prior to the 2021 health check, the main, and it certainly wasn't a complaint, the main observation was there's just too much information, and a lot of it, from my perspective, is stuff that they probably don't really even need to know to do their jobs well. The second point is about the role, and it is actually in part of the body of the report. It's this role of they see themselves as advocacies, they see themselves as representing their communities, but a lot of the time and effort that they undertake in delivery of their community board work is actually not that kind of work, although it might look like it. There's either before, during, or after steps in a process of advocacy and representing your community and listening to them that could be beefed up significantly to support them to actually undertake a much stronger advocacy role for their unique communities, and in so doing, strengthen the decision-making at the council table. Part of that comes from um, improving the channels of communication that the community board members have with their communities. And at the moment, they are incredibly varied and not particularly consistent. But also the channels of communication between the council and the community boards themselves. So there's a lack of joined upness is the term I would use in the way those things operate. And that's not specifically when I say the word communication, I'm not looking or pointing at a function on its own called communication. I'm talking about the way the entire organisation operates, communicates, engages, and then how the community boards operate, engage, and communicate with and to their communities. The working together better piece of advice is around if you were able to through either an induction process or a hui process that feeds into the induction process, develop systems, practices, and guidelines for better collaboration. This in itself would actually enhance the way that the community boards can hear from their communities, feed that into the way that the council hears that information, deals with it, and makes decisions with it, and then closing that loop back out to those communities. And the simple example that, and I won't use a specific one, lest it identify that the community board, but this was an often heard feedback from the community boards. The staff come to us to ask for input to things, but they've already done the work on that before it comes to us. So they're actually asking us to either rubber stamp it or check it, but we haven't had a chance early on in the process to actually input into the thinking that went into designing that thing. And so these are perceptions rather than realities, because I actually think there is a lot more work that is being done by the council body and the staff to go to community boards earlier in the process than they did in 2021. But there's a perception or a feeling that the community boards are not always involved early enough. And that's partly goes back to that role they feel they have as advocacy for their communities. If they don't know what's coming, or they don't understand the process, or they have not been asked at a very early stage, they can't then go and ask their community what they think about it and use that to inform the feedback. So it's like looking at the circle of engagement needs to be broadened, and that in itself would actually help the community boards to operate and feel like they were achieving much greater success in their role. So I know that, yes, I said time is limited. I'm happy to go through some more specific the advice at the end of the report if you'd like me to, but I'm equally happy to take questions or for you to ask me to clarify any of the points that I've either raised or raised in the report. Which would you prefer, Mayor Rob?
Thanks, Elizabeth. It might be a good time now to pause and see if anyone does have any questions for what you talked about so far. So Councillor Rudden-Claw's put her hand up. So yeah, you can go first if you like.
Thank you very much. I'm looking at the general observations.
I'm sorry, I can't hear the councillor.
The comment has come from someone on a community board. I'm between a rock and a hard place because I don't know if I work for the community or Central District Council. So from my point of view as a councillor, I always say I work for the ratepayer for the activity and I represent council. So is it something in that we talk about, Rob?
So just did you hear that question, Elizabeth?
No, I'm sorry,
so
I did.
Effectively on page 134, where you've got one of your green little notes in there where it says, I'm between a rock and a hard place because I don't know if I work for my community or for SDC. So it was, and Councillor Rudden-Claw was just talking about her role as a councillor as well, and she sees herself as being there for the ratepayer and yeah, representing the ratepayer, sorry, and tying that into potentially the induction.
So I will answer this in two ways. One is related to the report and one is not. So the role of a councillor is to be there for everyone in their community, ratepayer plus, it's not just the ratepayer. The second point is between a rock and a hard place is someone who's on a community board, and this comes out in many ways, are going, am I here to just do things for the council, or am I actually here as a community advocate to be a channel for good communication and engagement with that community? And because it's not clarified to them, and they never get a chance to explore it, which is probably another really fundamental point to try and help you understand a community board member, by and large, is someone who puts their hands up because they have been, as do councillors as well, because they have been shoulder tapped by someone in their community. They're a good listener. They're someone who could take on board ideas, share them with other people, and potentially because there are other skills that they have, financial accountability and all those other things. But at the core of a community board member is this idea that you are part of my local community at the very neighbourhood level, and therefore you understand the issues and challenges we have, and you will be our channel of communication between us and the council, which is a much bigger and more formal organisation. And if the community board members don't get a chance to explore that balance in terms of their role, they end up feeling torn between, sometimes I feel like I'm there being someone who's supporting my community, listening to them, engaging with them. But then when I go to another part of my community, they say, well, you're not someone who works for us. You're someone who actually gets paid by the council. And sometimes I don't know which one I am. Helping them understand they can have both hats on at different times is just part of a conversation in terms of induction that not just community board members, but sometimes elected members might find helpful as well. And there's not time for that yet.
I understand that, that's great. And that's how I advocate as well. The other question I had was a lot of, in this review, you talk about some of the community boards, conversations happening prior to the meeting, they get into a meeting and then stilted process. So can we look at a more relaxed way potentially of the meeting process for our community boards as a suggestion?
Did you hear all of that one, Elizabeth?
Sorry, I've got a yell.
Yeah.
Yes, and I'm smiling because it's such a clear observation was, and this came up in 2021 as well, if community boards are treated like mini councils and shoehorned into following very formal council standing orders, processes and structures and the way they operate, it actually stifles that whole natural, raw, neighbourhood representative, community advocate approach. And I think what I would be suggesting, if it's possible, that you can, of course, have a formal part of any community board meeting, but it doesn't have to mimic what happens at a council meeting where you have to be quite formal in the way that you talk to each other. And that goes back to how comfortable the chairs of the community boards are with operating in that space. So you might have 3 or 4 items that are for discussion, which means we're actually just going to have a chat about it and we're going to get everyone's ideas, or we're going to, here's a proposal the council wants us to talk about, and just do it through that. But there's also a part of the meeting where you have to go, all right, now we have to make some decisions or advice, and that can be a very small part of the meeting. It doesn't have to follow a mini council approach.
But Bertie just wanted to make a point to that.
One point I want to make is all of the recommendations in the report, we are looking into it and seeing how we can implement this. The other point I want to make is we're talking about a council and 9 community boards. There will have to be a difference across those boards. You all know not every board operates in the same way. So we are working out how we can enable the boards themselves to have some conversations about how they want to operate. There will have to be some parameters, as you all know, a framework is always helpful. So we need to keep that in place, but allowing the bits that Elizabeth's talking about, free and frank conversations, discussions, community feedback to come through, and all of those matters. And that point about what their roles are, and to really explore that a bit more is also going to be really useful, because their roles, and Elizabeth's mentioned it, even the board members' roles are similar to yours, which is that you do hold a dual role. You hear from the community, but you also have to think broader. You can't just think of the ward that you're from, or a particular community. You'd have to balance that against the needs of the entire district. So it would be similar. So there would be those kind of conversations that would need to happen as well.
I just want to touch on Councillor Ravenclaw's first point as well. I'm conscious of other people that want to talk as well, but an observation that I made quite early on in this triennium was at a community function, community event, public event, where one of the community boards had a stand there, and I was just lurking in the shadows, kind of watching the interaction between the board and the public. And there was one thing that stuck with me was when a member of the public was speaking to the board member, and they said something about council, the board member said, "Oh, no, I'm not council."
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah. And it's that whole council is actually the community, and it's a reflection. We're representatives of the community, and to bridge that gap through the community boards, where they see themselves as council, but able to fulfil the role that you talk about, Elizabeth, and you talk about Margie as well, I think is the winning formula. And what I've noticed lately as I've been going around all the boards is a lot of the board members are wearing their name badges, and even going out to some of the public meetings we've been to, the board members have been wearing their name badges. So that's actually taking a bit of pride in being part of council rather than trying to hide it. No, I'm not part of council. I'm actually here for the community. So it kind of feels like we are getting some growth in that space. And just reflecting to your second point, it's interesting because I was at a board meeting the other day, and it was great. Like we've got today, members of the public coming along, and they got to a part of the board where there was a discussion about a particular topic that was interesting to the members of the public, and they wanted to engage, and the chair found himself in a position of, oh, do I follow the rigid council processes? And I was quite relieved when he said, oh, well, actually, let's just, you can participate. And the public then participated coming in, which made for a much more relaxed and conducive environment. So it's quite cool that we can have that flexibility. And I think it'll be good to embed that into the new boards where we don't have to be too black and white in terms of that process. But I am conscious that other people want to talk. Don, you've got your...
Oh, thanks, Rob. Thanks, Elizabeth. I'm just wondering, with the improvement path for the community boards, is there any scope for increase? You did touch on the financial delegations, but perhaps increasing the roles of community boards so that they were able to take ownership of perhaps some of the smaller projects in the communities.
So thank you, and I'm sorry I missed your name, but thank you, Councillor. So I have very strong views on this, and so I'm going to state them, but then I'm going to refer you to something else. So I think that, yes, community boards should have a level of financial delegation that enables them to be flexible and not spontaneous, but to be able to operate in a way that responds to their community needs and delivers things in that kind of, and I use the term neighbourhood sense, because even though your community boards cover vast areas, at the end of the day, because of the amount of people that are in those areas, they are effectively neighbourhoods. The second point is that the Community Board Executive Committee has developed a report called a framework for councils and community boards that was launched at the conference. I'll show you. I've got it here. Look, you might have seen it. So this report here goes into, it says, here's 3 different models that could be applied to the way community boards operate. And think of them as mama bear, papa bear, baby bear, if you like. They're 3 different models that you as a council would look at those and go, well, actually, here's the one that we prefer for the way that we work with our community boards. And one of them, for instance, does have very clear and significant, maybe not in dollars, but in terms of that sense of responsibility for the local board. And at the other end of the spectrum, it doesn't. So you need to look at those models and go, well, which one would work best for us? And then you draw up that accord with your community boards and work with them accordingly. But yes, I personally think that there should be more financial delegation, but not my call to make, and it's probably not my area of specialty, to be honest.
Thank you. Any other questions? Cool. Looks like it's been a very worthwhile process, I think, and thank you for the passion that you've taken out in carrying out this work, and it's sort of shone through, and your knowledge and experience across the sector has been quite valuable as well. And nothing beats getting sometimes an outsider's observation of what's going on. Like, I don't think we could have done this work internally. It's good to have that kind of outside lens. And I know, and Vibhuti's touched on it, that there is a real desire to implement a lot of this because it worked last time, and I'm sure it's going to work the next time as well as we go through. And your comment at the start about this being pertinent to the induction period, no better time to start doing these at the start of a new triennium and starting to embed them. Sorry, Maggie, you had another question?
So are we going to survey again? This is an ongoing commitment of council. Going to survey community boards again in another couple of years.
I'd certainly like to. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a decision for council to make as we go forward, but I think like we talked about the reserve management plans earlier on being iterative, the dog bylaws iterative, the way that we operate needs to be iterative as well, so that we're constantly as relevant as it can be for our community. So my opinion to your question is yes.
So
Yeah. Councillor Dutton?
I'm just wondering, when these community boards are elected and the first meeting get proceeded with standing orders, I'm just wondering if we could have a different set of standing orders. It was like an A4 page that sort of covered the fundamentals of an orderly meeting without, because I think they take one look at that and
I think that was that Councillor Duffy, did I hear?
It was,
yes, sorry, yes, it was.
100%.
Keep it simple.
That's exactly what my advice would be, is that you can actually have something that's a lot simpler. And were things to escalate to a situation where you needed to have a more formal situation, let's imagine there is a situation sometimes where things can get out of hand. That's the time to look at whether you want to bring in a more formal approach for maybe a board that's having some difficulties and needs help navigating. But to blanketly cover them with very formal standing orders and council processes is actually one of the barriers they face to feeling like they're doing their jobs well. And can I just say, because I get the chance to work across New Zealand with councils and with community boards, the Southland community boards are the best ones that I see. And I'm just saying that because I think you're kind of my favourite in one sense, but the breadth of your district, the size of it, and then the fact that you have the community boards operating as you do, you're doing a really good job. This report is actually just saying, here's some things you could do to enhance it and to make it even better. And I think you should be quite proud of the fact that your operation and the way things are going is not a bad situation at all. There are some very poor operators out there in this space. So well done to you. And thank you for the opportunity to work with you all. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. We are, Elizabeth does have to go 12, so we're going to have to wrap this up if you can do it quickly.
One last question. In the Oriti Community Board last meeting, one of the community board members spoke about the conduct. Wasn't signed with the meeting, but he said it's a document that is a huge, long document, and when he talked to previous community board members about it, they said, well, we really don't know what it was. So was the code of conduct brought up by the community boards? Because I've already had some representatives that are standing, putting themselves up for community board election, that are talking about the code of conduct document and saying that it's a long-winded piece of. Do you understand?
I have got the meeting that I'm attending 2 meetings today. That's why I had a time limit on me, but I've probably got another few minutes because I can just see they're taking a break. So I would quite like to answer that. I think the question was, some of the people standing for community boards have asked about the code of conduct, or do we have a code of conduct for community boards? Am I right?
And the size of the document as well.
The size of it, yeah. Well, so if I brought you back to the conversation around induction and potentially some workshops with incoming community board members, the question I would be starting with is what would be helpful for you to feel safe in this role that you've taken on? So you're coming at it from, and people might say, well, we want to be respected. We want people not to talk over us. We'd like to have some confidentiality around what we do. I would do it that way for the community board rather than laying on them a massive document that potentially is not either able to be fully read because there's so many other things to do, and potentially shoehorns them into not understanding that they have a collective responsibility to work together, and how they work together can be decided by them, and that they will generally come up with the same ideas. It's just that it would be in their own words.
It's effectively a rules of engagement for how a team's going to operate, whether it's a rugby team or a soccer team or a netball team or a community board or a.
It's fun to modernise, because some of you.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
I just make it the same time to modernise and
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am conscious that you need to go, so I just want to give the opportunity for anyone else if there's anything parting that you want to ask before Elizabeth does disappear.
Probably
Yeah,
through.
Councillor.
Hi, Elizabeth, it's Tom O'Brien here.
Hey, Tom.
Just within that space of sort of shared responsibility, I think, with the historical local government elections and the low voter turnout, is there some way we can improve that in terms of getting our community board chairs and our members to better engage with their members of community? Because I don't know about you, but I have heard that members of the community coming to me and saying, hey, look, we didn't know about X, Y, and Z. And I said, well, have you spoken to your community board around this? And there still seems to be a little bit of a disconnect there. And I just wonder if there's some way that we could sort of change that narrative, because it seems to have been that way for a period of time. And I know that there are various factors that influence that, but do you have any sort of magic bullet in your chamber that you could fire off to be able to sort of, how do we, bearing in mind that, the roles of community board members are to be objective and to be representative of their communities at large. And I know that can be quite difficult in sort of rural areas. Do you have any ideas around that?
It's a big question. Oh, and I'll keep my answer as brief as I can. The magic bullet is relevance. The people will engage with the council and in a key part of the democratic process if they think it's relevant to them, if it's meaningful, and if they think it will make a difference. That's coming from the bottom up. If you start way out world in the big wide world, levels of trust and confidence in any democratic institution across the universe at the moment seems to be in a steady decline, and has been for about 25 to 30 years. I won't go on, you don't need to go into the reasons for that. So effectively and you can't do anything about that. What can you control? You can control how relevant and connected you are into your communities. So if a community board member, if you want to increase the participation in the voting, campaigns aren't going to do it. Nobody's interested in campaigns to get people voting. What people are interested in is how can you make voting easy for me? And how relevant is it that I even bother? So if you haven't done it already, I would talk to your electoral officer about getting some boxes put in supermarkets in each of your community board areas, and then using your community board members to actually tell people that that's where they can take their vote to post it, because otherwise you'll never get to a post box. But also to think about this whole, how do we help our community board members who are the most relevant of our elected members within each of their neighbourhoods and communities, no disrespect to the people in the room, who are the people on really on the ground, how do we actually help them to be able to listen and respond more effectively to those things that are concerning people in their neighborhoods, because that's when people go, oh, so that made a difference. They actually listened to me, or they got back to me. They couldn't fix what I asked them to fix, but at least they found out and got back to me. That's how you build the trust and confidence, and that's what's been missing.
It's a good question and a good answer. And it's just reminding me of a conversation I had with an Aucklander in the weekend, who in a conversation said, I'm not going to bother voting in the local body election. And that relevance piece was part of the answer, because obviously with my position, I'm going, well, why? What's going to make you actually vote? And because Auckland is so big, he was saying he's so far removed from his elected members, he doesn't even know who they are. He doesn't have a link. He can't talk to them. He can't find out what they're actually about. So there's no point in actually voting. And I think when you look at the strength of the community boards, where you've got people in your community that you are bumping into in the supermarket, or when you're getting fuel in your car, you get that connection and you get that relevance, and you can have a conversation with that person. If the community boards have the right autonomy and level of delegations where you can make a difference, then that person knows by talking to that person they can actually make a difference, and it ties it all together and brings council closer to the community. So I think that's what's missing in local government nationwide, and something that we can bridge that gap. But yeah, good question and good answer. Do you need to?
It's that conduit. So if a community board member, as you can see in my green quotes, if they're not even sure what their role is, or they're between a rock and a hard place, or they're feeling, I don't really know what I'm doing, or how to be an advocate or a representative, then they can't do it. So building up their capability to operate as a channel for the council, for the community, and to be a trusted local representative in a different way to a district councillor. Okay, I'm not undermining the roles that you all have. Then getting clarity on that is a really huge step forward and would make quite a difference.
Maybe that should be something that councillors do in the future in terms of making times within their community board meetings. Maybe it's something that we should be doing after the election. If there's
I just have one more, well, probably one, it's a little word of caution as well, which goes back to 1989. I'm sorry, but that ages me somewhat. Oh, sorry, 2002. And when the Local Government Act was changed, the whole function of local government changed from being what it was, I won't bore you with that, into a new organisations that were meant to be listening, advocating, the whole purpose of local government conversation, which is flip-flopped. But we still have people being elected who think they're back in 1989. And they think they're being elected to represent a particular point of view around the table, and that is their contribution to decision making. Whereas in actual fact, community board members epitomise this. They're meant to be able to listen to a whole range of views and either bring those views to an informed decision-making process, to inform the decision-making process, or to collectively provide feedback back that says this is where we need to be going with this. And that, when you've got people who are standing for a community board who think they're there for one job and one job only, that can be quite difficult. And so broadening the scope of and supporting community board members to understand that they are effectively someone who is a neighbourhood champion across a whole range of issues, that does bring a different spin, if you like, to the way that they should be operating.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And we could talk all week on this, I think, but we are going to have to wrap this up. So thank you very much for the work that you've done. It's been, as you can see, gratefully received. And I know that it's going to lead to a much stronger council going forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And,
can I just wish you all,
yeah, sure. Yep.
Wish you all who are standing in the upcoming the very best of luck. And I do hope that it continues to go as well as it has been in Southland. So kia ora.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sure.
So I'm going to happily move from the chair that we received the report to him seconder, Councillor Wilson. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against? That is carried. And I will now, running slightly behind time, close our council meeting with a karakia. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa pounamu te moana, ahirahi mai tātou I te rangi nei, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou I a tātou katoa, amiei, huiei, tai kiei. May peace be widespread, may the sea be like greenstone, a pathway for us all this day. Let us show respect for each other, for one another, bind us all together. Thank you. And thank you to the members of the public who came along as well. Now, just before